Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do a book review of I Shall Wear Midnight, written by Terry Pratchett. This is a fantasy novel first published in 2010. It is the 38th Discworld novel of 41 in total, and the fourth novel of 5 set around the character of Tiffany Aching. So, first of all, what is the Discworld? It is, as you might gather from the name, a large, flat, disc-shaped world with the ocean running off the edge and such, which rests, logically or illogically, on the back of 4 very large elephants, which by themselves stand on the back of a very large world turtle called Greater Tuid, which swims through space as though it was water. Strange, definitely. Interesting and useful for the plotline, also definite as well. So brilliant concept and one that works well. So as far as this book is concerned, this is set in the area of the Discworld known as the Chalk locally. Known for, obviously, the fact that the soil is obviously heavily made up of chalk. Not really surprising in that way. I mean, it's a local custom for obvious reasons. Now, the Chalk is an interesting area because it's got vast undulating plains of wheat and fields, little copses of trees, obviously rivers and such. It's a nice sort of farming land really for the most part, and it's got an interesting selection of characters. The lead character in this particular book is, unsurprisingly, called Tiffany Aching. At this point, this is the 4th book of 5, she is now, 15-ish, I can't remember her exact age, but she's roughly that now, more towards her sort of mid-teens at this point. And now, after the adventures that she'd had in the first 3 books, she's now considered a more established witch in the area and is becoming far more important and far more established and frankly competent. Yes, she still has a lot to learn, and indeed that's what she has to do in the book, a lot of learning, but she's more confident in helping people with sort of traditional witch sort of duties as such. Basically witches in the Discworld essentially smooth out the little bumps that people have in their lives. Obviously, one of them being childbirth and related matters, but also health and well-being. Obviously, mental health being one of them. And they're very much, a sort of general doctor, almost, of sorts, and counsellor, advisor. They're basically pretty much whatever you need them to be to help you live your lives in a more contented fashion. However, there is something slightly strange going on around the Chalk, and indeed around the whole of the Discworld, because there seems to be a slightly negative feeling towards witches, a sort of anti-witch sentiment. And now, in the past, some witches have obviously had a slightly negative, feeling towards them, but that's always been maybe occasional particular witch. At the moment, there seems to be a very strange and quite aggressively violent sentiment against, witches are bad, don't trust them, they're actually evil. Which witches aren't, and they've never had that reputation before, and they've got no precedent for people to base that off. So obviously something is going on. I mean, he has to go on it. Otherwise there's no plotline for the book. So Tiffany Aching gets involved because, of course, she's a major plot point, and she has to figure out why is this sentiment running wild, and why does, for instance, she seems to be finding a very strange individual. It appears in the shape of a man, or like a black, like shadow man. Why does this man keep appearing and saying things to Tiffany randomly? And it's creating problems for her, the other new witches in the area as well, and this is just problematic. So she tries to start figuring this out with the help of other witches like Granny Weatherwax, although she plays a relatively minor role, and the Knack Mac Feegle, which are a group of very small, tiny little gnomes or pixies that like to drink, steal cows and fight, not necessarily in that order, and they are very much sarcastically sort of themed as being basically small Scottish people, basically, you know, wearing kilts and with a very blatantly obvious meant to be Scottish accent. It's just Tea Pratchett having fun with, you know, a particular idea that he's got, and at this point, it's, to be honest, it's wearing a little thin, because the Knack McFeagle were fun in the early days. At this point, they're a bit like, whatever, but, you know, still a nice idea. But with the Knack McFeagle, Tiffany ends up going on a road trip to a surprising area, Ankh-Morpork, which is basically London, England, where Tea Pratchett has taken every stereotype about London over the ages and put them in a city and twisted and turned them and made them kind of both interesting and made fun of them. And it's a really interesting city. A lot of the books are set in Ankh-Morpork, and Tiffany actually goes to the city, which is really interesting because obviously she hasn't been to anywhere like this before. So it's mixing you know, a Tiffany Aching book with one of the books set in an urban environment in Ankh-Morpork, like the City Watch novels or one of the Wizards novels. So it's a strange mixture, and one that works really well because her attitude to life and her outlook is very different from obviously city people. Mix this with the fact that what's going on with this weird anti-witch sentiment creates a strange atmosphere, let's say. And of course, the Knack McFeagle do actually follow her to the city. Remember, they like to fight and drink, and they go into a big city. So, you know, there's a few interesting issues there. And remember, Ankh-Morpork has experienced a lot, so they're not exactly used to, as a city, seeing unusual people like the Knack McFeagle. Even the Knack McFeagle are quite normal. So the response is frankly not what anybody would think. So overall, it's an interesting, you know, experiment in mixing, you know, the environment and the type of personalities. And obviously, I'm not going to say too much more about the plot, but let's say things obviously are trying to resolve themselves with, you know, Tiffany being stuck in the middle, and it goes from there in an interesting and well plotted manner. One of the reasons why it works really well is because of the characters. Tiffany Aching again is a very well developed character. She's got an interesting personality. Her psychology and her motivation for doing what she's doing is also highly developed and curious, because she's obviously a young character, a young woman that's making her way in the world. She's got a certain reputation. Obviously in this book, that reputation is being affected by outward influences. So she's trying to figure out what's going on and trying to find her way in the world and help other people around her find their way in the world, because she's a witch. That is literally what witches do. They just help people as and when they need help. So that's an interesting one. Obviously there are multiple other characters as well. The other various newer witches that you discover in the previous books, they are now becoming fairly well established names within their local areas as well in neighbouring areas. All fairly young witches as well. That's basically taking over from the previous generation, like Granny Weatherwax, who is kind of essentially Tiffany's you know, predecessor, and pretty much her, you know, Tiffany's protege, which some people are obviously impressed by, because for many people Granny Weatherwax is considered the greatest witch that has ever lived. So being the protege of somebody who is frankly considered the absolute best, you know, Tiffany's got a lot to live up to, and she's desperately trying to do so. And you've got the Knack McFeagle, which I've already mentioned, a strange component to the Tiffany Aching books, but one that works fairly well for the most part. As I said, at this point I'm personally a bit whether about them, because, you know, it's a bit like well worn and over well worn frankly, but you know, that sometimes happens. They're still fun and they've got their moments, and overall all the collection of different characters, and you meet a character as well in Ankh-Morpork that Tiffany meets from, I'm not going to say who, but they are a character from one of the very earliest Discworld books that makes a reappearance that I did not expect, and in a very interesting way indeed. I was really surprised by this character coming back. I haven't thought about this character since a long time, and yeah, they've got an important role to play. I'm curious where Pratchett will take this character and whether this particular character will make an appearance in the last Tiffany Aching book, which I'll get to shortly. So it's an interesting mixture of characters, and the characters work because of the rather interesting environment. The area known as the Chalk is a really interesting one because it's quite varied, of course, being you've got the different little areas within it being sort of fairly countryside, although it's also different from the Ramtops, which was obviously the original major sort of magical area with the original set of witches in it, which was basically essentially Pratchett recreating essentially Wales, part of the UK, and making it very magical and such. The Chalk is not that. The Chalk is this rolling countryside with fields and little villages, and it's sort of quite a nice area. But obviously, as always in this world, and so with any fantasy book really, an area that seems really nice, of course, is going to hold secrets and interesting stories, and every mile of it holds its own story, its own tales, myths, legends, and indeed that's one of the major things that Tiffany has to deal with. The idea of what witches. There's been an idea for a long time, but the Discworld itself is evolving. It's becoming more modern, more industrial. So now the concept of witches and what they do and how they fit into the world is also changing. So it's not just a case of whatever this anti-witch sentiment is going around. It's also a sort of general changing of global society, advancing to a level where witches have to either frankly change and evolve, or frankly they're not going to work and fit in society anymore. Frankly, that's what the characters have them to do. And the other environment is, of course, as I said, Ankh-Morpork, Discworld London, which is always fun, and obviously the combination of both, this rural area and some of the characters going into a very urban environment is a fun one, which I think works extremely well. And one of the things that it works well towards sort of achieving and promoting is some of the ideas and themes that T. Pratchett is trying to discuss. Of course, T. Pratchett is trying to discuss, basically amongst others, the idea of growing up and growing into yourself and growing into your surroundings, because that which through the character of Tiffany, about what you are as a child, what you are as a teenager, and then what you may become as an adult. It's finding what you are mentally and psychologically, and trying to say, right, I am this. What can I do with this? What I am, and how can I live in the world knowing who and what I am? And it's a interesting experiment. And obviously, with Tiffany, she has all sorts of rather dramatic things going on. Obviously. So to sort of affect her, and it's an interesting theme, and T. Pratchett writes this fairly young character really rather well. And another, not quite the major theme, but certainly an interesting secondary theme is the idea of basically countryside versus city or urban, and it's an interesting one, and it's not a major theme because he's not trying to sort of challenge, the countryside characters like obviously Tiffany. He's not trying to put them directly, it's not Tiffany versus the city or Tiffany versus the City Watch or anything else. It's just contrasting them, saying this is what the countryside can provide, and rural living can provide what it's good for. This is what the city can provide, what it's good for. And frankly, ultimately, it's a case of neither of them are better than the other, neither of them are worse. They merely have different uses and different benefits. Of course, rural living might have better natural, obviously, for natural health, but of course, cities have the people and the knowledge and the experience, and they want to grow and be more. So they have the technology, which can lead to other types of, better medical knowledge. Just as an example, focusing on the medical, but that applies to everything. Well, that's not necessarily the best, because of course sometimes the countryside remedies, for instance, can work remarkably well and actually work better than the city ones. So Pratchett is trying to say neither is best. It's just sometimes one's better than the other in certain situations, and it's just figuring out which one works for the system and the society and the environment that you are living in now. And both are valid and both are useful. And frankly, don't discount one type of system or society over another. Don't just think, oh yes, the city is best because it's got technology, therefore it must be superior. I mean, I'm a city person, and I'm not going to start saying I must live in the city and countryside things are terrible, because I know that's not true, and that's what Pratchett is trying to say here. So overall, some interesting themes and ideas, and overall I would really recommend this book. It's got great characters, a great environment, or several of them in fact, some great ideas and themes, with a great plot line, and overall I really enjoyed this book and I would recommend it. Although don't read this as your first Discworld. Frankly, I would severely recommend, really badly, please don't read this as the first, especially in the Tiffany Aching novels. Remember, this is the fourth, so make sure you read the other three, because the Tiffany Aching novels, I think, almost do this more than any other Discworld novel. They do carry on slightly more. I mean, they're not sequels to each other, by the way, but they do follow on closer than any other character set within the Discworld. So I would recommend heavily that you read the Tiffany Aching books in the official order, because they'll be a bit strange otherwise. And with that said, that is it for this review. So if you've read this book, or you would like to, then please leave a comment and we can talk about it. If you'd like to know more, then again, please leave a comment and I will try to answer to the best of my knowledge. Obviously I'm no expert, so I'll see what I can do though. And all my social media links, as well as a link to this book on Goodreads, can be found in the description box below. And with that said, that is it for this review. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.